Question 1. A Scrum team has been working together for over a year and has become highly proficient. During sprint retrospectives, however, the team struggles to identify meaningful improvements, often stating that everything is fine. As a Scrum Master, what is the most effective approach? Suggest canceling the sprint retrospective for a few sprints to see if any issues arise. B. Bring in an external Agile coach to facilitate the retrospectives. C. Introduce new liberating structures or advanced facilitation techniques to stimulate deeper reflection. D. Use the retrospective to review team velocity and suggest ways to increase it. Answer. C. Introduce new liberating structures or advanced facilitation techniques to stimulate deeper reflection. The most effective approach is to introduce new facilitation techniques to help the team break out of its routine and uncover deeper insights. A mature team that feels everything is fine may simply be stuck in a pattern, and new formats like 1-2-4 all or Troika consulting can provoke different kinds of conversations and reveal latent opportunities for improvement. The Scrum Master's role here evolves from a basic facilitator to a coach who challenges the team to achieve an even higher level of performance. Simply canceling the event or focusing on a single metric like velocity misses the point of continuous improvement, which is a core pillar of Scrum. Remember, even the best teams can get better, and your role as a Scrum Master is to help them find the path. Question 2. The product owner is frequently absent from daily scrums and is not readily available to answer the developers' questions during the sprint. This is causing delays and frustration. What is the most appropriate first action for the Scrum Master? Coach the product owner on the impact their unavailability is having on the sprint goal and the team's self-management. B. Instruct the developers to make their best assumptions and continue working to avoid any slowdowns. C. Escalate the product owner's lack of engagement to their line manager. D. Schedule a mandatory daily meeting between the product owner and the developers. Answer. Coach the product owner on the impact their unavailability is having on the sprint goal and the team's self-management. The most appropriate first action is to coach the product owner, making them aware of the consequences of their absence. This approach respects the product owner as a peer and aims to solve the problem through transparency and collaboration, which are central to Scrum. By explaining how their unavailability creates impediments for the developers and jeopardizes the sprint goal, the Scrum Master empowers the product owner to find a better way to engage. Actions like escalating to a manager or forcing assumptions undermine the team's self-management and the collaborative spirit of Scrum. A key takeaway is to always start with coaching and conversation, as it fosters accountability and preserves professional relationships. Question 3. During a sprint retrospective, two developers have a heated argument about coding standards. The rest of the team becomes silent and uncomfortable. What is the Scrum Master's primary responsibility in this situation? A. Act as a mediator to help the two developers resolve their conflict immediately. B. Postpone the retrospective and talk to the two individuals separately. C. Remind the team of the Scrum values and facilitate a constructive conversation for the whole team to establish working agreements. D. Ask the technical lead on the team to make a final decision on the coding standard. Answer. C. Remind the team of the Scrum values and facilitate a constructive conversation for the whole team to establish working agreements. The Scrum Master's primary responsibility is to facilitate a constructive conversation by reminding the team of the Scrum values, particularly respect and openness. This conflict is not just between two individuals. It affects the entire team's ability to collaborate, making it a team issue, not a private one. The goal is to guide the team towards creating shared working agreements, or improving their definition of done to include agreed-upon coding standards, turning the conflict into a valuable team-building opportunity. Taking sides, postponing the issue, or deferring to a single person undermines the team's collective ownership and self-management. Think of conflict as an opportunity for growth. Your role is to create a safe environment for the team to navigate it together. Question 4. A stakeholder complains to you that the team's progress is too slow and that they are not delivering enough features per sprint. How should a Scrum Master respond? A. Promise the stakeholder that the team will work harder to increase their velocity in the next sprint. B. Explain that velocity is an internal metric for the team's use only and should not be a concern for stakeholders. C. Invite the stakeholder to the next sprint review to see the increment and discuss the product backlog with the product owner. D. Defend the team by showing the stakeholder a burn-down chart to prove they are working at a consistent pace. Answer. C. Invite the stakeholder to the next sprint review to see the increment and discuss the product backlog with the product owner. The best response is to invite the stakeholder to the sprint review to engage directly with the team and the product owner. The sprint review is the designated event for stakeholders to inspect the increment, ask questions, and collaborate on what to do next, which provides transparency into the team's progress and the value being delivered. This approach addresses the stakeholders' concern constructively by focusing on the tangible product and future direction rather than defending metrics or making empty promises. It reinforces the empirical nature of Scrum, where feedback on a real increment is more valuable than a report. Remember, the sprint review is the primary event for aligning with stakeholders, so use it to foster understanding and collaboration. Question 5. Several Scrum teams are working on a single product. They are experiencing significant integration problems near the end of their sprints. Which is the most effective approach for a Scrum Master to suggest? A. Propose a dedicated integration sprint after every 2 regular sprints to resolve the issues. B. Suggest that all teams extend their sprint length to allow more time for integration tasks. C. Facilitate a meeting with members from all teams to create a shared, integrated definition of done. D. Designate one team as the integration team responsible for combining all the work. Answer. C. Facilitate a meeting with members from all teams to create a shared, integrated definition of done. Facilitating the creation of a shared and more stringent definition of done is the most effective long-term solution. When multiple teams work on one product, their combined work must result in a single integrated, usable increment at least once per sprint. A common definition of done ensures that done means integrated, tested, and potentially releasable for everyone, which addresses the root cause of late integration problems by building quality in throughout the sprint. Approaches like an integration sprint or a dedicated integration team introduce delays and dependencies, which are contrary to the Agile principle of delivering a valuable increment frequently. A great tip is to remember that in scaled Scrum, integration should be a continuous activity, not a separate phase or job. Question 6. A manager from outside the Scrum team has been attending the daily Scrums and using the event to ask developers for individual status updates. This is making the meetings long and less useful for the team. What is the best way for the Scrum Master to handle this? A. Publicly ask the manager to stop talking during the daily Scrum. B. Cancel the daily Scrums until the manager stops attending. C. Talk with the manager privately, explain the purpose of the daily Scrum, and suggest they attend the sprint review instead for progress updates. D. Report the manager's disruptive behavior to human resources. Answer. C. Talk with the manager privately, explain the purpose of the daily Scrum, and suggest they attend the sprint review instead for progress updates. The most constructive approach is to speak with the manager privately to educate them on the purpose of the daily Scrum. This event is a planning meeting for the developers, not a status report for management. The key word here is for the developers. By explaining this and guiding the manager toward a more appropriate forum like the sprint review, the Scrum Master resolves the disruption while building understanding and respecting the manager's interest in the team's work. This action serves the Scrum Master's role as a teacher and impediment remover for the team while also coaching the wider organization on effective Agile practices. A helpful rule of thumb is to address such issues through private conversation and education first, as it's less confrontational and more effective for building long-term Agile adoption. Question 7. The definition of done is found to be too weak as it does not include performance testing. This has led to the release of a slow and unstable product increment. Who is responsible for creating and improving the definition of done? The Scrum Master. B. The product owner. The entire Scrum team. D. The Quality Assurance Department. Answer. C. The entire Scrum team. The entire Scrum team is collectively responsible for creating and evolving the definition of done, DoD. While the developers do the work, the DoD is an agreement that ensures a shared understanding of what it means for work to be complete, which impacts everyone. The product owner needs to know what done means to forecast releases, and the Scrum Master coaches the team on its importance for transparency and quality. In this scenario, the discovery of a weakness in the DoD is an opportunity for the whole team to inspect and adapt it during a sprint retrospective. Always remember that key artifacts and commitments in Scrum, like the DoD, are owned by the entire team to foster collective accountability. Question 8. What is the primary purpose of the sprint goal? A. To provide a detailed list of all the product backlog items selected for the sprint. B. To provide flexibility for the developers regarding the exact work needed to achieve the objective. C. To be a performance metric for the product owner to measure the developers against. D. To ensure that all the work forecasted for the sprint is completed by the end of the sprint. Answer B. To provide flexibility for the developers regarding the exact work needed to achieve the objective. The primary purpose of the sprint goal is to provide coherence and flexibility, giving the developers a clear objective to focus on. It answers the question of why the sprint is valuable, acting as a guiding star rather than a rigid contract. This allows the developers to collaborate and make trade-offs during the sprint as they learn more about the work required, fostering self-management and creativity in solving the problem. The sprint goal is a commitment, but it's about achieving an outcome, not just completing a list of tasks. Think of the sprint goal as the why for the sprint, which empowers the team to figure out the how. Question 9. A Scrum team consistently has a significant amount of spillover work, unfinished product backlog items, at the end of each sprint. What is the most likely underlying cause a Scrum Master should investigate? A. The sprint length is too short. B. The product backlog items are too large or not well understood. C. The developers are not working hard enough. D. The product owner is adding work after the sprint has started. Answer B. The product backlog items are too large or not well understood. The most likely cause for consistent spillover is that product backlog items (PBIs) are not ready, meaning they are too large, ambiguous, or poorly refined. When PBIs are too big, estimating them is difficult, and hidden complexities are often discovered late in the sprint, making completion within the time box impossible. A skilled Scrum Master would facilitate better product backlog refinement sessions to help the team break down items into smaller, more manageable pieces and clarify requirements before the sprint begins. While other factors could contribute, improperly sized or understood work is a classic root cause of failing to meet a forecast. A great takeaway is to look at the quality of the input, the PBIs, before judging the output of the sprint. Question 10. The product owner wants to add an urgent, high-priority item to the ongoing sprint. As the Scrum Master, what is the best advice you can give? A. Tell the product owner that the sprint backlog is fixed and no changes are allowed once the sprint starts. B. Advise the developers to accept the new item and work overtime to complete it along with the original scope. C. Facilitate a negotiation between the product owner and the developers to see if the new item can be accommodated by removing an existing item of similar effort. D. Advise the product owner to cancel the sprint and start a new one with the updated priorities. Answer. C. Facilitate a negotiation between the product owner and the developers to see if the new item can be accommodated by removing an existing item of similar effort. The best course of action is to facilitate a negotiation between the product owner and the developers. While the sprint goal should remain stable, the sprint backlog is emergent, and changes can be made as long as they don't endanger the sprint goal. By facilitating this conversation, the Scrum Master empowers the team to self-manage and make an informed decision based on trade-offs. This respects the product owner's need to respond to market changes and the developer's ownership of the sprint backlog. Canceling the sprint is a drastic measure reserved for when the sprint goal becomes obsolete. A key tip is to remember that Scrum is about adaptability. The goal is to manage change collaboratively, not to rigidly forbid it. Question 11. Which of the following is the best example of a Scrum Master acting as a true servant leader? Taking notes for the team during the daily scrum so they can focus on their plan. B. Ordering lunch for the team during sprint planning to keep morale high. C. Coaching the developers on how to facilitate their own daily scrum to increase their self-management. D. Creating detailed task lists for each developer to ensure the sprint backlog is clear. Answer. C. Coaching the developers on how to facilitate their own daily scrum to increase their self-management. Coaching the developers to facilitate their own events is a prime example of servant leadership because it focuses on growing the team's capabilities and independence. A servant leader's goal is not to serve the team by performing tasks for them, like taking notes or ordering food, but to serve their growth and help them become more effective and self-sufficient. By teaching them skills like facilitation, the Scrum Master makes themselves progressively less needed for basic operations, allowing them to focus on removing larger organizational impediments. Always think of servant leadership as teaching people to fish, rather than giving them a fish. Question 12. A Scrum Master notices that the sprint retrospective often devolves into a session where team members blame each other for failures. What is the most effective initial action to take? A. Introduce and enforce the prime directive at the start of the next retrospective. B. Ask the managers to attend the retrospective to ensure professional behavior. C. Focus the retrospective only on successes and positive events. D. Shorten the retrospective to limit the time available for blaming. Answer. A. Introduce and enforce the prime directive at the start of the next retrospective. The most effective initial action is to introduce the prime directive, which states, regardless of what we discover, we understand and truly believe that everyone did the best job they could, given what they knew at the time, their skills and abilities, the resources available and the situation at hand. This sets a crucial tone of safety and trust, shifting the focus from blaming individuals to inspecting the process and system for improvements. It creates the psychological safety needed for open and honest discussion, which is the foundation of a productive retrospective. The other options are counterproductive as they avoid the underlying issue of trust rather than addressing it head-on. A key tip is to always focus on creating a safe environment first. Meaningful improvement can only happen when people feel safe enough to be vulnerable. Question 13. What is the Scrum Master's role regarding the product backlog? A. The Scrum Master is responsible for writing all the product backlog items. B. The Scrum Master has the final say on the ordering of the product backlog. C. The Scrum Master ensures that a product backlog exists and that the team understands the need for a clear and well-managed backlog. D. The Scrum Master is responsible for ensuring the product backlog is complete before the first sprint can begin. Answer. C. The Scrum Master ensures that a product backlog exists and that the team understands the need for a clear and well-managed backlog. The Scrum Master's role is to act as a coach and facilitator regarding the product backlog, not to own or manage its content. They teach the importance of effective product backlog management techniques and ensure that the artifact is transparent and understood by all. The product owner is the one person accountable for the content and ordering of the product backlog. By coaching the team and product owner on techniques for refinement and ordering, the Scrum Master empowers them to manage the backlog effectively themselves. Remember, the Scrum Master is a master of the process, not the product, so their role is to ensure the framework is used correctly. Question 14. An organization's management wants to assess the performance of its Scrum teams. They decide to compare the velocities of different teams. As a Scrum Master, what is your primary concern with this approach? Velocity is a private metric and should never be shared outside the team. B. Comparing velocities is misleading because each team's story point estimates are unique and relative. C. This will encourage teams to inflate their estimates to appear more productive. D. Both B and C. Answer. D. Both B and C. Comparing velocities between teams is highly problematic for two main reasons, making both B and C correct. Firstly, velocity is based on relative estimates, story points, that are calibrated uniquely to each team's context, making comparisons between teams meaningless. It's like comparing apples and oranges. Secondly, when velocity is used as a competitive performance metric, It creates perverse incentives for teams to inflate their estimates to look better, destroying the metric's value as a reliable forecasting tool for the team itself. The Scrum Master should coach the organization on more effective ways to measure value, such as focusing on customer satisfaction, product outcomes, and evidence-based management (EBM) metrics. The key takeaway is that velocity is a tool for a team's forecasting, not for management's performance evaluation. Question 15. The developers on a Scrum team are complaining that the sprint planning event feels too long and unproductive because the product owner is not prepared. Product backlog items are vague and not ready for discussion. What should the Scrum Master do? A. Extend the time box for sprint planning to allow for more in-depth discussion. B. Take over the responsibility of refining the product backlog items before sprint planning. C. Coach the product owner and developers on the importance and techniques of ongoing product backlog refinement. D. Cancel sprint planning and ask the product owner to reschedule when they are prepared. Answer. C. Coach the product owner and developers on the importance and techniques of ongoing product backlog refinement. The root cause of the unproductive sprint planning is the lack of prior product backlog refinement, so the Scrum Master should coach the team on this activity. Product backlog refinement is an ongoing process where the product owner and developers collaborate to add detail, estimates, and order to items, ensuring they are ready for sprint planning. By teaching them why this is crucial and facilitating effective refinement sessions during the sprint, the Scrum Master empowers the team to solve the problem themselves. This makes sprint planning a much smoother and more effective event focused on creating a plan, not discovering requirements from scratch. Remember, a poor sprint planning event is often a symptom of poor product backlog refinement. Question 16. The 5 Scrum values are commitment, focus, openness, respect, and courage. A team member is hesitant to share a dissenting opinion about the technical approach for fear of causing conflict. Which Scrum value does the Scrum Master need to foster most within the team? Focus. B. Courage. C. Commitment. D. Respect. Answer. Courage. The Scrum value that most needs to be fostered in this situation is courage. Courage in Scrum means team members feel safe enough to take risks, ask tough questions, and challenge the status quo, even when it might lead to disagreement. The team member's hesitation indicates a lack of psychological safety, and the Scrum Master should work to create an environment where constructive dissent is seen as valuable, not disruptive. By fostering courage, the team can have open discussions that lead to better decisions and prevent potential problems. A helpful tip is to remember that courage isn't just about big heroic acts. It's also about having the small daily courage to speak up for what is right. Question 17. A new Scrum team is forming with members from different departments who have never worked together. What is the most valuable activity for the Scrum Master to facilitate during the first sprint? A detailed skills assessment to assign roles and responsibilities to each member. B. A workshop to collaboratively create a team charter, including working agreements and a definition of done. C. A deep dive into the company's long-term product vision and strategy. D. A training session on advanced estimation techniques like Monte Carlo simulation. Answer. B. A workshop to collaboratively create a team charter, including working agreements and a definition of done. For a new team, the most valuable initial activity is to facilitate the creation of a team charter or working agreements. This process helps the new members get to know each other, establish rules of engagement, define how they will handle disagreements, and create a shared understanding of quality through an initial definition of done. This foundational work accelerates the team's journey through the forming and storming stages of development, building a strong base for collaboration and self-management. While other activities are useful later, establishing how the team will work together is the critical first step. Think of it as building the team's operating system before trying to run complex applications. Question 18. The product owner is consistently trying to push the developers to take on more work than they believe they can complete in a sprint. As a Scrum Master, what is your role in this situation during sprint planning? A. To support the product owner's desire to maximize value by encouraging the developers to stretch their capacity. B. To act as a facilitator, ensuring the developers have the final say on how much work they can forecast for the sprint. C. To analyze past velocity data and tell the team exactly how much work they should take on. D. To side with the developers and shield them from the product owner's pressure. Answer B. To act as a facilitator, ensuring the developers have the final say on how much work they can forecast for the sprint. The Scrum Master's role is to be a neutral facilitator, upholding the rules of Scrum which state that only the developers can select the amount of work for a sprint backlog. They are the ones doing the work, so they are best positioned to assess their own capacity. The Scrum Master ensures the conversation between the product owner and developers is productive and that the developer's forecast is respected, reinforcing their self-management and ownership. Siding with either party or dictating the scope undermines the collaborative and empirical nature of sprint planning. A key reminder is that the Scrum Master serves the Scrum process, which means protecting the framework's rules that are designed to lead to the best outcomes. Question 19. During the daily Scrum, the developers talk about their progress, but they don't seem to be collaborating or adapting their plan for the next 24 hours. The meeting feels more like a status report. What is the most effective way for the Scrum Master to improve the event? Start asking each developer the 3 questions. What did you do yesterday? What will you do today? Any impediments? B. Remind the team that the event is for them to create a plan and ask, how can we best work together today to make progress on the sprint goal? C. Reduce the time box of the daily Scrum to 5 minutes to force them to be more concise. D. Report to the product owner that the team is not collaborating effectively. Answer B. Remind the team that the event is for them to create a plan and ask, how can we best work together today to make progress on the sprint goal? The most effective intervention is to refocus the event on its true purpose, inspecting progress toward the sprint goal and creating an actionable plan for the next 24 hours. The 3 classic questions can often lead to a status report mentality, so shifting the focus with a powerful, goal-oriented question encourages collaboration and forward-looking planning. This action is a form of coaching that helps the developers take ownership of the event and its outcome. The goal is to make the daily Scrum a dynamic, team-level planning session, not a series of individual reports. A simple way to remember this is that the daily Scrum is about the team's plan for the day, not about what individuals did yesterday. Question 20. The organization wants the Scrum Master to provide regular RAG red, amber, green status reports on the project's progress. How should the Scrum Master handle this request? A. Create the RAG report based on their personal assessment of the sprint's health. B. Refuse to provide the report stating that it is not part of the Scrum framework. C. Coach the stakeholders on Scrum's empirical approach and invite them to sprint reviews for genuine transparency on progress. D. Ask the product owner to create the RAG report, as they are responsible for the product's success. Answer C. Coach the stakeholders on Scrum's empirical approach and invite them to sprint reviews for genuine transparency on progress. The best response is to coach the stakeholders on how transparency is achieved in Scrum and guide them toward more effective methods. Simple RAG statuses can be misleading and hide the true state of the product. Real transparency comes from inspecting a tangible, done increment at the sprint review. By explaining this and inviting them to participate, the Scrum Master helps the organization adopt a more agile mindset, moving from subjective status reports to empirical evidence. This action fulfills the Scrum Master's duty to help the organization understand and enact Scrum. Remember, your role is to increase transparency through Scrum's built-in events and artifacts, not to create additional, potentially misleading reports. Question 21. A Scrum team has successfully delivered a valuable increment that meets the sprint goal. However, the product owner is unhappy because not every single product backlog item from the sprint forecast was completed. What does this situation indicate? A. The developers did not commit fully to the sprint backlog. B. The Scrum Master failed to ensure the team completed all the work. C. The product owner may have a misunderstanding of the sprint backlog's flexibility and the primary importance of the sprint goal. D. The sprint should be considered a failure. Answer C. The product owner may have a misunderstanding of the sprint backlog's flexibility and the primary importance of the sprint goal. This scenario indicates a misunderstanding by the product owner about the nature of a sprint commitment. The primary commitment in a sprint is to the sprint goal, not to every single item in the sprint backlog. The sprint backlog is a forecast of the work needed to achieve the sprint goal, and it can emerge and change throughout the sprint. If the team achieved the goal, the sprint was a success, and the Scrum Master should take this as an opportunity to coach the product owner on this key concept. Success in Scrum is defined by delivering value and achieving goals, not by completing a checklist of tasks. Question 22. In the context of Scrum, what does the term empiricism mean? A. Making decisions based on experience, observation, and experimentation. B. Following a predefined, detailed plan without deviation. C. Relying on the authority of a manager to make important decisions. D. Focusing on individual performance metrics to drive improvement. Answer: A. Making decisions based on experience, observation, and experimentation. Empiricism is the core of the Scrum framework and means making decisions based on what is known, grounding them in evidence and experience. It is the opposite of following a detailed upfront plan in a complex environment where not everything can be known. Scrum implements empiricism through its three pillars: transparency, making work visible; inspection, frequently examining progress and artifacts; and adaptation, adjusting course based on what is learned. For example, the sprint review is an event where the team and stakeholders inspect the actual increment, observation, and adapt the product backlog for the future, adaptation. Think of empiricism simply as learning by doing, and using that learning to make better decisions. Question 23. What is the Scrum Master's responsibility concerning technical debt? To ensure that no technical debt is ever created. B. To prioritize the reduction of technical debt in the product backlog. C. To make the development team aware of the long-term consequences of technical debt and ensure it is transparent. D. To write the tasks required to fix the technical debt for the developers. Answer: C. To make the development team aware of the long-term consequences of technical debt and ensure it is transparent. The Scrum Master's role regarding technical debt is to ensure transparency around its existence and consequences. They coach the developers and product owner on how technical debt can impact future velocity, maintainability, and overall product quality, making it a visible factor in planning and decision-making. While the developers are responsible for the quality of their work and the product owner prioritizes the backlog, the Scrum Master ensures the conversation happens. For instance, they might encourage the team to visualize technical debt or discuss its impact during a sprint retrospective. The key is that the Scrum Master ensures the topic is not ignored, enabling the team to manage it consciously. Question 24. A team complains that the product owner is defining product backlog items as user stories but is only focusing on the what, and not the why, the value. As a Scrum Master, how would you coach the product owner? A. Tell the product owner to use a different format for product backlog items. B. Coach the product owner on the importance of articulating the value and purpose behind each item to motivate the team and enable better decision-making. C. Ask the developers to add the why to the stories themselves. D. Schedule a mandatory workshop on how to write perfect user stories. Answer B. Coach the product owner on the importance of articulating the value and purpose behind each item to motivate the team and enable better decision-making. The most effective approach is to coach the product owner on the significance of the why. Explaining how a clear purpose and value statement empowers the developers to make smarter implementation choices, innovate, and feel more connected to the outcome is a key responsibility of the Scrum Master. This coaching helps the product owner grow in their role and improves the quality of the product backlog, leading to a more effective and motivated team. The focus should be on understanding the principle of conveying value, not just rigidly adhering to a specific format like user stories. A great tip is to remind everyone that the goal of a PBI is to start a conversation, and that conversation is always better when it starts with why. Question 25. An organization is undergoing an agile transformation, and managers are struggling with their changing roles. They feel a loss of control and are unsure how to interact with the self-managing Scrum teams. What is the most constructive action for a Scrum Master to take? Advise the teams to ignore the managers until they learn the new rules. B. Organize workshops for managers to explain the principles of servant leadership and how they can support agile teams. C. Escalate the manager's interference to senior leadership. D. Create a formal communication plan that dictates when and how managers can talk to the teams. Answer: B. Organize workshops for managers to explain the principles of servant leadership and how they can support agile teams. The most constructive and impactful action is to proactively help the managers navigate this transition by providing education and coaching. Organizing workshops on servant leadership and their new role as enablers rather than directors helps alleviate their concerns and equips them with the tools to support the teams effectively. This approach treats the managers as crucial partners in the transformation, fostering a collaborative environment instead of an adversarial one. This is a core part of the Scrum Master's responsibility to help the wider organization understand and enact Scrum. Remember that an agile transformation is a human change process. Supporting everyone involved is key to success.